The vote was not close. 31 lights turned white on the board. 4 stayed gray. 1 burned amber, Earth's single mark against the motion. The result hung in the air of the grand hall like smoke that would not clear. Ray Colton looked at it for 3 seconds, then he looked away. He did not look at the alien delegates who were already talking among themselves. Relaxed now. The business of the session concluded to their satisfaction. He did not look at Councillor Voss, who had returned to his seat with the easy movement of a man who had done something simple and expected. He looked at the table in front of him, plain gray, functional, the kind of table that had always been good enough for Earth because Earth had never been given anything better. Dira was sitting beside him. She was 26, the youngest aide Earth had ever sent to the Galactic Council, and she was very still in the way people go still when they are trying not to show what they are feeling. Her tablet was on the table. She had stopped writing on it 10 minutes ago when Voss had begun his presentation. Ray picked up his communicator. He typed 2 messages. They were short, each one less than a sentence. He sent the first to Admiral Sova Holt, who was commanding Earth's deep space fleet from a ship sitting in orbit 400,000 kilometers away. He sent the second to General Bain Harlow, Earth's military liaison, who was in the same orbit in a different ship. Then he put the communicator face down on the table and folded his hands. The Grand Hall was something that took most humans a long time to get used to. It was built to make you feel small. That was not an accident. The ceiling was 200 meters above the floor, carved from a single piece of pale crystal that caught the station's external light and scattered it into colors that had no names in any human language. The seating tiers rose in a steep circle around the central floor, and every tier was full. 412 delegates from 61 worlds, and behind them, staff and observers and press and anyone else with access clearance. Earth's table was at the back of the lower floor. It had been there since Earth joined the Council 30 years ago. The placement had been explained as a matter of registration order. Earth was a newer member. The back tables were simply what was available. 30 years later, no one had offered to move them. Councillor Voss's presentation had lasted 40 minutes. He was Tharan, tall, pale gray skin, fingers slightly too long for a human hand, dressed in dark violet robes that his culture used to indicate formal authority. He was very good at speaking. He had a voice that carried without effort, and he used data the way a skilled person uses a knife, not wildly, but with precise and deliberate cuts. The data he had used was real. That was the part Ray kept turning over in his mind. Earth's spaceflight history was short. Earth's internal conflict record was long. Earth's technology dependency on alien-supplied systems was significant and documented. Voss had not fabricated anything. He had simply assembled true facts into a shape designed to make Earth look like something that did not belong in the same room as the rest of them. The motion itself was called a reclassification. In formal council language, it meant Earth would be downgraded from full member status to developing world status. It meant Earth's vote would become advisory. It meant that any decision affecting Earth's space access, trade rights, or territorial waters could be made without Earth's agreement, only with Earth's input. Voss had framed it as help. He had said, with a kind expression, that Earth was not ready for the responsibilities of full membership, and that the Council had a duty to guide younger civilizations through their development. Several delegates had agreed. Some had laughed. Not openly, they were politicians. They had manners, but in the small ways that do not need sound to be heard. Delegate Prell had not laughed. Prell was from a small world called Even, green-skinned and quiet, with dark eyes that moved slowly and saw everything. Prell had been the last to register an abstention. Ray had noticed the delay. It was small, but it was there. Speaker Auron had called the result in his slow, layered voice and moved on to the next item on the agenda. The session continued. Trade quotas for the Selhari corridor. Border adjustment proposals near the fourth arm. Normal things. Ray sat through all of it. He did not leave early. He did not make a statement. He did not ask to address the floor. When the session ended and the chamber began to empty, Dira finally spoke. "What do we do?" she asked. Her voice was level. She had worked for Ray for 3 years and she had learned to keep her voice level. Ray stood up. He straightened his jacket, plain dark fabric, no medals, no insignia, just the small blue pin that identified him as Earth's senior diplomatic representative. "We go back to quarters," he said. "I need to make some calls." They walked out of the grand hall through the side exit, past a group of Tharan staff who stopped talking when they passed, and started again once they were gone. The corridor outside was tall and cool, and lit with the pale blue light the station used in its public areas. Dira walked beside him. She had more questions. He could tell by the way she was breathing. He let the silence sit for a moment before he spoke again. "They gave us a reason," he said quietly. "People always think that's a bad thing. It isn't." Dira looked at him. "A reason for what?" Ray did not answer right away. He was thinking about a mining town he had grown up in, a town that every government map had labeled as low priority, not worth the investment, too small to matter. He was thinking about what the people in that town had done about it. They had not asked to be moved up the list. They had made themselves impossible to ignore. "Go get some rest," he told Dira. "Tomorrow is going to be a long day." He said it the way a man says something he already knows is an understatement. There is a particular kind of silence that fills a room when someone has already made a decision, but has not yet told anyone what it is. Ray's quarters had that silence. He sat at the narrow desk near the viewport, 3 call screens open in front of him, a cup of water untouched at his elbow. Outside, the alien station turned slowly in space, its towers lit from within, its docking arms stretched wide, its design built for species that thought differently about scale and light and beauty than humans did. It was impressive. It had always been impressive. Ray had stopped being impressed by it years ago, not because it was not worth admiring, but because admiration had never been the point. Dira sat in the chair across from him. She had not gone to rest. He had known she wouldn't. "Walk me through it," she said. Not a request, a professional habit. She processed things better when she could hear them spoken. Ray leaned back. 30 years ago, Earth joined this council. We accepted a back table. We accepted an advisory role on decisions that affected our shipping lanes. We accepted slower processing on membership upgrades, on voting weight adjustments, on trade zone expansions. We were patient because patience was supposed to build trust. "It didn't," Dira said. "No, it built a record that said Earth will wait, Earth will accept less, Earth will not make trouble." He turned the water cup slowly without drinking from it. "Voss didn't attack us. He used our own behavior as evidence that we don't belong." Dira was quiet for a moment. "So what does walking away actually accomplish? They already took our full membership. If we withdraw from the treaties, we lose trade protections, supply chain agreements, the navigation corridor rights." "Yes." She stopped. "You want to lose those things." "I want them to feel what those things were worth." He set the cup down. "There are 3 treaties in the current 14 that supply raw materials to Tharan processing stations, not luxury goods, industrial materials they use for ship components. Earth has been the most reliable supplier for 9 years because we were trying to be good partners." He paused. "Tomorrow we stop being good partners." Dira pulled up the treaty files on her tablet. Her eyes moved fast across the data. Ray watched her work. She was good at this, at finding the numbers inside the language, at seeing what things actually meant beneath what they were called. "The Selhari Corridor Access Agreement," she said slowly. "If we pull out of that one specifically, 6 alien freight operators lose their fastest route between the second and third arms. They've been using that corridor under Earth's navigation clearance for 11 years. Without it, they add about 9 days to every delivery cycle. They'll be furious." "They'll be furious at Voss," Ray said, "because it was his motion that voided the terms." The room was quiet again. Outside, a large alien cargo vessel drifted past the viewport, its hull marked with Tharan freight insignia. Ray made the first call. It went to Earth's Foreign Affairs Office, not to a minister, but to the permanent secretary, a woman named HFY who had worked in the department for 22 years and understood that calls from Ray at odd hours meant something unusual was happening. He explained what he wanted. HFY asked 2 questions, then she said she would begin the process. The second call was to the trade attaché, a man named Webb who was stationed on a midpoint supply station 3 systems away. Webb was responsible for the day-to-day management of 7 of the 14 treaties. Ray told him what was coming. Webb was silent for a long moment. "All 14?" Webb asked. "All 14. Another silence. "The Even Compact is in that list. Prell's World, they've been good to us." "I know," Ray said. "I'm going to handle Even separately. But formally, yes, all 14 go on suspension notice at the same time. It has to be clean. It has to be simultaneous. If we pick and choose, it looks like bargaining." "And it's not bargaining." "No," Ray said, "it isn't." He ended the call and looked at the treaty files still open on his screen. 14 documents. Some of them were decades old, built carefully by people who had believed in the work they were doing. Ray did not feel good about what he was about to do to them. He felt certain about it, which was a different thing entirely. There was a message waiting on his communicator. He had not noticed it come in. It was from Delegate Prell, sent from a personal channel rather than an official one. It said, "I abstained. I want you to remember that." Ray read it twice. He typed back 4 words, "I already do. Send." Dira was still looking at the treaty files. She had that expression she got when the numbers were telling her something she was not ready to hear. "If we do this," she said, "they're going to say we're the ones being aggressive, that we're punishing the whole council for 1 vote." "They'll say that," Ray agreed. And he stood up and moved to the viewport. The station's lights reflected off the dark surface of space in long, pale streaks. He had stood at this window many times over the years, looking out at something humanity had worked to be part of. "My father had a saying," he said. "He said the only people who call you aggressive are the people who expected you to stay quiet." He turned back to the desk and opened a new communication channel, this one going directly to Earth's government. He had a recommendation to make. He already knew how to word it. Calm, clear, without anger. That was the part most people would not understand, that this was not about anger. Anger burns fast and leaves nothing useful behind. This was about something older and slower and far more difficult to put out. It was about what happens when patient people stop being patient. The news reached the Tharan Trade Ministry at what their calendar called the second rest period, the quiet hours when most administrative staff were off duty and the automated systems handled routine traffic. It was not a quiet night. The suspension notices arrived simultaneously across all 14 active treaty channels, filed through Earth's diplomatic system in clean, legal, perfectly formatted documents. Each notice cited the same clause, a standard withdrawal provision buried in the mutual agreement terms that every treaty contained and that no one had ever used. The clause said that if either party standing within the Galactic Council was altered without their consent in a way that materially affected the treaty's original terms, the non-consenting party had the right to suspend the agreement pending renegotiation. Voss's reclassification motion had, very precisely, altered Earth's standing. The Tharan Trade Ministry's overnight duty officer was a low-ranking official named Sorvin. He had been in his position for 4 years and had handled exactly nothing unusual. He read the first notice and assumed it was an error. He read the second and third and began to feel a specific kind of dread that comes from realizing that something very large is happening, and you are the only person currently awake to see it. He spent 6 minutes deciding whether to wake his superior. Then he did. Across the station network in Earth's diplomatic section, lights were going off one by one, not cut, switched off properly from the inside, by people who had packed their personal items and closed their workstations and left everything in good order. Earth's communication staff. Earth's trade attaches, two cultural liaison officers who had spent years building relationships with alien colleagues, and who said their goodbyes that night in low voices, with the kind of handshakes and nods that do not need translation. The alien staff they worked alongside were confused. Several tried to ask what was happening. The human staff answered politely, said they had received new instructions from home, and that they hoped to be in contact again when things were clearer. They did not say more than that because there was nothing more to say. In the corridor outside the Earth diplomatic section, a Tharan communications officer named Brill stood and watched three human staff members walk past with their bags. He had worked 2 doors down from Earth's press office for 6 years. He knew one of them, a woman named Gree, Earth's media coordinator, who had once spent an afternoon helping him translate a technical document because his own department was backlogged. "Gree," he said. She stopped, looked at him. Her expression was not cold. She was not the kind of person who did things coldly, but it was decided. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Home," she said. "Because of the vote." She considered that. "Because of what the vote meant," she said. Then she picked up her bag again and kept walking. Brill stood in the corridor for a moment after she was gone. Then he went back to his office and wrote a report to his supervisor, and in the middle of writing it, he stopped and looked at his screen for a long time. The Selhari Corridor Access Agreement was the one that made the most noise. 6 freight operators had routing permissions through the corridor under Earth's navigation clearance. Those permissions expired automatically when the treaty suspended. At approximately the 4th hour after the notices went out, the corridor routing system began rejecting their automated clearance requests. The rejections were not aggressive. There was no alarm, no warning, no confrontation. The system simply said, "Clearance not found. Please apply through the relevant authority." The relevant authority was now Earth, which was not currently processing applications. The 6 freight operators' dispatch systems began recalculating routes. The alternatives added between 7 and 11 days to each active delivery cycle. 3 of those operators had time-sensitive shipments already in transit. 2 of those shipments were Tharan industrial components. The alert that reached Councillor Voss arrived at the end of his sleep cycle. He read it 3 times. Then he called his trade minister. The trade minister had already been awake for 2 hours. "It's the withdrawal clause," she said. "It's perfectly legal. We used the same clause ourselves during the Pelhari dispute. We cannot challenge it." "Can we negotiate?" "They haven't opened a negotiation channel." Voss was silent. "They haven't opened any channel," the minister continued. "Their diplomatic section is empty. Their staff have left the station. We have no one to talk to." On a different part of the station, Delegate Prell of Even was awake as well, sitting at a desk in the Even diplomatic quarters reading through the suspension documents. Even was a small world with a small economy, and it had depended quietly on a resource-sharing compact with Earth for 8 years. The compact was one of the 14. Prell read the documents twice. Then Prell opened a personal channel to Ray Colton. The channel connected. Ray's face appeared on screen. He had clearly not slept. "I saw Even's compact is included," Prell said. "It is," Ray said. "I abstained from the vote." "I know, I told you I remembered." Ray's voice was not unkind. "But if I suspend 13 and not yours, it looks like I'm bargaining. I'm not bargaining, Prell. I want you to understand that." Prell was quiet for a moment. "I do understand it," Prell said slowly. "I'm not calling to argue. I'm calling because I want to tell you formally, on record, that Even will be seeking a new agreement with Earth. Through a direct bilateral channel, outside the Council framework, as soon as Earth is ready." Ray looked at the screen. Something shifted in his expression, not quite surprise, but close. "You do that publicly," Ray said. "I abstained because I thought it was wrong," Prell said. "What is the use of thinking something is wrong if you do nothing about it afterward?" Ray nodded slowly. "I'll have someone contact your office when we're ready." The channel closed. Ray sat back in his chair. Through the viewport, the station was still lit and turning, large and impressive as it had always been. But something about it looked different now. Not smaller, just less permanent. Admiral Sova Holt had been in space for 31 years, and she had learned that the most dangerous orders were the ones that looked simple. Ray's message had been 4 words: move the fleet, wait. She had read it, set it down, and looked at the star chart on her forward display for approximately 90 seconds. Then she had called her navigation officer and given the coordinates. The coordinates were not toward the Galactic Council station. They were not toward Tharan space. They were toward 3 border corridors in the outer reaches, areas that 6 different alien nations had been quietly, carefully, and never officially disputing with each other for the better part of a decade. Earth had stayed out of those corridors, not because Earth lacked the ships or the right, but because Earth had been trying to be a good member of the Council, and good members did not insert themselves into other people's quiet disputes. Earth was no longer a full member of the Council. The motion had been very clear on that. Holt gave the order at the start of her duty cycle. By the time most of the fleet's crew had eaten breakfast, the formation was moving. 61 ships, not Earth's full military capacity, but a significant and visible portion of it. Destroyers, long-range patrol vessels, 3 carrier-class ships that served as mobile command and support platforms. They moved in formation, unhurried, on a heading that any navigation system in the sector would log, track, and report. Holt had not charged weapons. She had not raised shields to combat configuration. She had simply moved, the way a large animal moves when it stops pretending not to notice something. The first alert reached the Galactic Council's Security Monitoring Office 40 minutes after the fleet began moving. The monitoring officer flagged it and sent it up through the chain. It took 2 more hours to reach Speaker Oran's desk, partly because it was still the quiet period, and partly because no one at any step of the chain quite believed what they were reading. Earth's fleet was moving into the contested border zones. Not aggressively, there was no weapons signature, no communication jamming, no aggressive posture of any technical kind. The fleet was simply going there. And under the navigation rights provisions that governed open space in that sector, Earth had every legal right to be there. Every legal right. Because Earth was no longer bound by the Council agreement that had previously included a voluntary restriction on Earth's fleet movement in those areas. Voluntary. The word appeared 3 times in the legal review that the Council's law office sent to Speaker Oran's desk. The restriction had always been voluntary. Earth had simply volunteered as a sign of good faith membership. Good faith that had, as of the previous session, been publicly and formally voted against. In the Tharan delegation's quarters, Councillor Voss was in his 4th meeting of the morning. His trade minister was on screen. His military liaison was beside him in the room. His communications secretary was standing near the door. The corridors, his military liaison said, pulling up the map. If Earth establishes a regular patrol presence there, even a passive one, it changes the balance of the Selhari access dispute, the Mevra boundary question, and the 3rd arm shipping rights that we've been working on quietly for 6 years. They can't just, Voss stopped, looked at the legal summary his secretary had handed him, read 2 lines, stopped again. They volunteered that restriction. And they've now withdrawn the volunteer, the liaison said, because they are no longer bound by the membership conduct framework that the volunteer was made under. Voss sat back. For the first time since his motion had passed, his expression was not comfortable. What did we actually do? He said, mostly to himself. His trade minister's face on the screen was doing something that was not quite "I told you so," but was very close to it. Holt's flagship reached the 1st corridor checkpoint at mid-cycle. She sent a standard navigation broadcast, the kind any fleet sends when entering an open area, calm and factual, no special language, no threats. The broadcast identified the ships, gave their heading and speed, and noted that Earth was conducting independent navigational security operations in the area. Independent. The word was chosen carefully. It meant Earth was not acting on behalf of anyone. Earth was acting for itself, in its own interest, in space it had every right to occupy. 3 alien monitoring posts in the area logged the broadcast and transmitted it back to their home governments within the hour. 2 of those governments had been the quiet parties in the Selhari corridor dispute, neither of them aligned with Tharan, both of them watching the dispute from a careful distance. Both of them sent urgent messages to their diplomatic offices on the council station. Back on the station, the emergency session was being organized. Speaker Oran had called it himself, reserved for matters the speaker personally judged as requiring immediate council attention. His staff sent the summons to all active delegates. Ray Colton did not receive one. Earth had no active diplomatic presence on the station. When the delegates arrived in the grand hall and took their seats, Earth's table at the back was empty. The chair was pushed in neatly. The surface was clean. There was nothing on it. Speaker Oran was ancient, older than most records, draped in layered gray robes that his species used to mark extreme seniority. He moved slowly and spoke slowly, and had seen more than anyone else in the room. He looked at Earth's empty table for a long moment before the session began. He did not say anything about it. He opened the session. But 2 delegates near the front noticed that he looked at that table twice more during the first hour, each time with an expression that was difficult to read and might have been, in a much younger person, something close to respect. Outside in the dark and quiet of the border corridors, Holt's fleet held position, patient, still, present. Waiting, the way Earth had learned to wait, not from weakness, but from long practice of knowing exactly when waiting ends. The broadcast went out at the start of the galactic standard day cycle, which meant it reached most inhabited systems during their working hours. It was not sent through the Council's official communication network. It was sent through Earth's own deep space relay system, a network Earth had been quietly building and expanding for 11 years, which most Council members had noted in reports and then not thought much about. Because Earth was a developing world and developing worlds built things slowly, and it had not seemed important. The relay system reached 63 systems. It was faster than the Council's own network by a margin that surprised several people who had never bothered to check. Ray sat alone in a small room. The room was on Earth's last remaining vessel at the station, a mid-sized diplomatic transport, plain and functional, docked at the outer ring. Everything else had already left. He had sent Dira ahead with the rest of the staff 2 hours earlier. He had set up a recording device on the table in front of him. 1 light, 1 camera, no flags, no official seal, no emblem of any kind behind him, just the gray metal wall of the ship's interior. He looked at the camera for a moment before he started. Not composing himself, he had been composed for 2 days. He was simply deciding one last time that this was the right thing to say and the right way to say it. Then he spoke. He said that Earth had come to the Galactic Council 30 years ago with the intention of being a contributing and cooperative member. That humans had accepted a smaller seat because they understood they were new. That they had been patient about voting weight, about trade classifications, about navigational restrictions, about 100 small things that added up to a picture of a civilization that was trying to earn its place. He said that patience by itself is not a strategy, it is a posture. And postures need to be met with something, with recognition, or with negotiation, or at minimum with honest disagreement. What Earth had been met with in the end was a public motion to reclassify it as a primitive world, backed by data that was technically accurate and deliberately assembled to humiliate. He said Earth was not declaring war. He said it clearly and without qualification. Humanity had no interest in conflict. That had always been true, and it remained true. He said Earth was withdrawing from 14 active treaties under legal provisions that those treaties themselves contained. He said Earth's fleet had moved into open space that Earth had every right to occupy. He said these things were not aggression. They were the natural result of a decision the Council had made, that Earth's agreements and restrictions had been voluntary, and that Earth was no longer volunteering. Then he said the part that people would repeat for a long time afterward. He said that any world which had voted in favor of the reclassification motion should expect no human ships in their shipping lanes, no human goods in their supply chains, no human personnel in their stations, and no human response to any request for assistance of any kind. Not as punishment, simply as a fact of the new relationship those worlds had chosen when they voted. He said that Earth would be seeking direct bilateral agreements with worlds that wanted mutual respect, that those agreements would not go through the Council, that they would be between Earth and whoever was willing to deal with Earth honestly, without emotion in the background deciding what Earth was allowed to be. He ended with one line. He said, "We did not come this far by giving up when things got hard." The broadcast lasted 11 minutes. It was calm throughout. Ray's voice did not rise. He did not use emotional language. He did not talk about injustice or shame or pride. He talked about facts and about choices and about what follows from choices. Within 2 hours, it had been viewed on every major alien network. Not because any of those networks had agreed to carry it, but because alien audiences were sharing it. Something about the simplicity of it was difficult to look away from. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic music, just a man in a plain room saying what Earth was going to do and why. In the Council's emergency session, which was still ongoing, a delegate from a small world called Veth interrupted the current speaker to say that he had just watched the broadcast and that someone needed to address it. Speaker Oren told the delegate to wait for the appropriate agenda point. The delegate from Veth sat down. But 3 others had already checked their own screens, and the chamber had a different quality to its noise now. Less of the frustrated, managing sound of politics, and more of the specific quiet that comes when people realize they have misread something important. Councillor Voss did not speak during this period. His communications secretary was monitoring the relay broadcast numbers and feeding him updates. 40 minutes after the broadcast went out, it had been viewed more times than any council address in the last decade. Most of the views were not from human systems. Aliens were watching Ray Colton sit alone in a gray room and tell the truth, and they were sharing it with each other. In the Tharin home system, 3 advocacy organizations filed public statements within the same hour, each one addressed to Voss's office, each one asking a version of the same question. What exactly had the council expected to happen? Voss did not answer them. He was reading the legal assessment of Earth's fleet position for the 4th time, looking for something his lawyers might have missed. They had not missed anything. The reclassification motion was never formally withdrawn. It was suspended. There is a difference, in council legal language, between a motion being reversed and a motion being suspended pending review. Reversal means someone was wrong. Suspension means circumstances have changed, and the matter requires further consideration. Speaker Oren chose suspension because he was old enough to know that institutions survive by never admitting they were wrong, only by finding new language for the same result. The suspension was filed at the end of the 3rd day. No announcement, no press release. The document simply appeared in the council's legal record with a timestamp and a procedural reference number. Ray was on the transport heading home when Dira found it and showed him the filing on her tablet. He read it once, set the tablet down, picked up the water he had been drinking and finished it. "That's it," Dira said. "That's it," he said. "They're not going to acknowledge." "No." She was quiet for a moment. "Does that bother you?" Ray thought about it. "It would have bothered me 10 years ago," he said. "I wanted them to say it, to admit it out loud in the chamber on the record." He looked at the tablet on the table between them. "Now I think the suspension is better, because it means they know. They just can't say it. And living with something you know but can't say is its own kind of weight." Through the oval viewport beside their seats, stars moved in the slow drift of deep space travel. Dira watched them for a while. She had grown up in a city that never got dark enough to see this many stars. She still was not used to how many there were. Prell reached out again, she said. Formally this time, through Evan's government channel. They want to begin bilateral talks as soon as Earth establishes a new framework office. I know, I saw. There are two others. A world called Veth, small, mid-ring system, and a place called Orvani in the Outer Territories. Both of them sent preliminary interest letters this morning. 3 in 3 days, Ray said. The broadcast helped. People respond to honesty when they're not used to it, Ray said. It's surprising at first, then they start to trust it. Dira pulled up the new correspondence on her tablet and began drafting preliminary acknowledgments, careful, warm, professional. She was good at the beginning of things. Ray had always been better at the middle, at the long, slow work of keeping something going when the initial feeling had faded. They made a reasonable team. Back on the council station, life continued. The Grand Hall held its regular sessions. Delegates voted on shipping quotas and border adjustments and the small procedural questions that made up most of any governing body's actual work. Earth's table at the back remained empty, pushed in neatly, as it had been on the day Ray and Dira left. No one had removed it. Facilities management had sent a query about whether to clear the space. Speaker Oren's office had replied with a single word: leave it. Councillor Voss had returned to Tharin on the 4th day, citing urgent home matters. His office issued a statement saying that the reclassification motion had been intended constructively, and that Tharin remained open to dialogue with Earth. No one from Earth responded to the statement, because there was no one from Earth on the station to receive it. The 3 Tharin industrial supply shipments that had been delayed by the Selhari corridor suspension were rerouted at significant cost. The freight operators involved submitted compensation claims to Tharin's Trade Ministry. Tharin's Trade Ministry forwarded the claims to the legal team, reviewing the reclassification motion's implications. The legal team sent back a memo saying the claims had merit but no clear resolution pathway. Sorvin, the duty officer who had first seen the suspension notices 3 days ago, wrote the memo. He had been given the assignment because he was the most junior member of the team and no one else wanted to write it. He wrote it carefully and precisely, and at the end he added one sentence that his supervisor later deleted before forwarding the memo upward. The sentence said, "It may be worth noting that Earth appears to have anticipated every legal consequence of this sequence of events before the sequence began." The sentence was deleted because it was uncomfortable, but the people who read the unedited version did not forget it. On Earth, in the Foreign Affairs building that sat in a mid-sized city that had no particular fame or history attached to it, a records officer filed the 14 suspended treaty documents under a new folder heading. The heading was plain text, no formatting. It said, "Agreements made in bad faith." Below it, the records officer created a second folder. It was empty except for 3 items, the preliminary interest letters from Evan, Veth, and Orvani. The folder heading said, "Agreements worth keeping." Ray saw the filing when he landed. He had not asked for it to be done that way. Someone in records had made the decision on their own. He sent a short message to the records office thanking whoever was responsible. He did not find out who it was. It did not matter. What mattered was the second folder. It was small and new and barely started. But empty folders have a way of filling up when the right people know they exist. Earth had not won a war. It had not made a speech that changed the galaxy overnight. It had done something smaller and, in the long run, harder. It had shown 63 worlds what it looked like when a patient people finally decided they were done being patient. Some of those worlds were afraid of what that meant. 3 of them so far thought it was exactly what they had been waiting to see. That number was going to grow.